What did your school waste money on that nobody liked? They made a huge screen with 4 huge plasma screens and put it in a very random place in a very random building hall. No signal. No signal. No signal. No signal. No signal. School spendings in a nutshell. 1. Pay high price and shiny technology. 2. Abundantly congratulate yourself about being a modern and advanced school. 3. Don't use it because complicated and staff is not trained. 4. Nothing changes. Teachers still use old or own equipment. 5. Repeat the next year. Name tags. Shortly after Columbine and all those other shootings peaked in frequency, it was supposed to keep outsiders from getting in the school unnoticed and shooting everyone, but at the time people doing the shootings were always students, so we joked they were bulletproof. Some of my classmates won a bunch of money for our school. Our school was one of the lowest funded schools in the district. The district took the money and spent it on another school. That reminds me, when I was a sophomore, my school was next in line to get renovations and upgrades. Only half classes even had air conditioning. Instead, the district built a new school that took half of my graduating class. They also took teachers, so my classes were still overcrowded. New TVs in the cafeteria that just show the morning announcements. They just need to send out announcements in an email. The large schoolyard at my school had a set of planters in the center. They were basically 4 triangles made of brick that pointed in at each other and created an X-shaped walkways between. The outside sides had a bench each attached. People would sit and chat to each other on the benches, teachers and students alike. There was very little litter or vandalism. The plants were kinda pretty insofar as any secondary schooler would care to notice. One year a duck made her nest in one of the planters, and apart from a few "oh hey a duck nest" comments, it was left alone. Then for some reason the school decided to rip the planters out. Took them 2/3 of the school year to do it and blocked off the X walkways, so everyone had to crush by on the outside lanes between classes. Everyone was super curious as to what the planters would be replaced by. Turns out, nothing. They simply bricked over the holes left by the planters and left it as a huge empty space. We didn't even get new benches, so no one had anywhere to sit during break. People started to miss the plants since the lack of color left the whole area kinda bland. We also kept to the old X walkway since stepping over the former planters felt weird. iPads for the kindergarten. They were intended to have educational apps on them that kids could play on at end or recess. Believe it or not, most kindergartners would rather play on the swings or play with dolls than learn to write their name on an app. No one used them, no one liked them, and they all broke within 2 months. HRRMM. My indoor recess at that age was the whole group using these big puzzle piece foam blocks to build castles and then crawl all over them. We would not have cared about the iPad either. Was on boys varsity soccer team in high school. New head coach, wanted to emphasize more analytical approach, and as such, had booster club buy a $10,000 goalpost camera. None of the team liked the idea anyway, especially since the girls soccer team used their money for new jerseys and nicer balls, and they still made it farther in their playoffs than we did almost every year. As it turns out, the coach couldn't figure out how to put the camera together, and we never used it. Biggest waste of $10,000 I've ever seen. When 65 inches TVs were like $4K a pop, they set about 8 of them around campus that just displayed the time. $4,000 clocks, not to mention whatever they used as a video source to send to the display. My son's current school sent out an email to parents announcing that they'd like to add voice projection to every class. He's in 1st grade and there are 20 kids in his class. Totally unnecessary. They had a demo session and it sounded horrible. When I was still a student, my school spent almost $200K to paint the roads outside our school. You read that right. Almost $200,000 of our precious tuition dollars to paint the roads outside blue and yellow. To pour salt on this painful wound, the paint job didn't even make it through winter. So just to reiterate, $200,000 for 3 months of painted road. I think I'm still angry about it. That's gotta be the dumbest one I've read in here. A lot of them are dumb in that money was spent on technology or other things that wouldn't be used, but those at least keep some value after being bought. This is just throwing money away. My high school wasted a ton of money buying 2 golf carts. Their reasoning was it allowed staff to get to any dangerous scenes faster. Except we never had any accidents and they were mostly used for joyrides by the hall monitors. This seems like a crappy idea regardless. Driving golf carts indoors in a school sounds dangerous. Our new Slick Willy superintendent insisted on buying an educational project for $500,000 that consisted of software that nobody wanted or could use. It was from his girlfriend. Slick Willy went to jail. One of the schools in our district paid an astronomical fee to an artist to create an artwork for the hall of the school. Paid for the dude's room and board for like a year and he produced a large polished piece of wood. No, literally that's it. It was supposed to be shaped like a heart but it looks more like a butt and is now known as the butt. We had a thing we called the butt boo, but some kind of modern art apparently. My school just spent tens of millions of dollars on a remodel that includes a new commons and front office area, which were not needed, but no new classrooms, which were desperately needed. The old commons was warm, inviting, bright and beautiful. It wasn't old. The new commons is dark, cold, sterile and uninviting. The exterior was changed too. The entire front of the school used to be attractive. Now it looks like a prison. I think maybe the architect presented the design as a joke, but our principal liked it so the architect just rolled with it. Our mascot was a rocket, and a certain percentage of school construction money had to be spent on art. They spent $90K commissioning a giant rocket sculpture for the main field entrance. When it was unveiled, the artist had made one tiny change to the design. Instead of a pointy rocket tip, he'd gone with a rounded, mushroom tip. I mean, we thought it was hilarious, especially when they cut off the tip as their solution to the problem, but nobody liked it. I'm a teacher. My first year, the school leader bought a ping pong table for the lounge in an attempt to make school more fun and relaxing. It simply became a surface to put copies on. It sounds like they had good intent, it just didn't work out. And at least those tables aren't too expensive so it wasn't a crazy amount. Son's elementary school PTO had an excess of funds. They decided to spend it on a buddy bench. A buddy bench is a bench that you can sit on if you want buddy. In theory it sounds like a decent idea except that it was placed in the hallway near the office and none of the kids wanted to be identified as someone who didn't have a friend. Nobody ever sits on it. This isn't common knowledge so I was really the only one incensed by it, but I worked for Cisco Foods as a baker at university, and the upper echelons of the administration had hired their own personal pastry chef to make these extravagant desserts for their meetings. The pastry chef was legit. She made absolutely amazing desserts of a wide variety every day, loaded them onto a cart, and with her baker's outfit and hat on would wheel it up to their daily administration meetings. Her salary was paid for by the students of the school, so that the administrators could dine on first-class pastries and desserts made from scratch each day. She was really good at her job and actually helped me improve in the bakery, but I was so mad her job even existed simply to provide pastries to people who just sat around and decided how the school's money was spent. I obviously didn't make a stink about it to anyone because she was my friend and I wouldn't ever dream of putting her employment at risk. But I couldn't help feeling like her entire career was to make fat cats fatter and it just boiled my blood. I'm also going to assume, from my time in corporate events planning, that most of the pastries went to waste since even the fattest cat can't eat more than a couple of croissants and most people won't even touch them. TVs. Like just random TVs in the hallway that showed slideshows and crap. Tens of thousands of dollars when we could have just put up bulletin boards. My school has loads of TVs that I don't recall ever see turned on. Cameras installed in nearly every inch of the school. Not for student safety but because the school board didn't trust the kids. My school was miles behind other high schools. Old textbooks and sometimes not enough textbooks. Computers were junk. No in-school programs. They spent every ounce of money on cameras and putting the rest in the school board's pockets. Honestly, I feel you with the camera stuff. Mine had cameras pointed into the girls' and boys' locker rooms, and at one point in my sophomore year, tried putting one inside of the locker rooms. Long story short, one person covered the whole thing in duct tape and one senior took the whole thing out of the ceiling and put it in the dumpster. My high school spent a bunch of money on this system to play popular songs for the last minute of passing time between classes so we'd hear popular music and as a convenient way to know to get to your next class. Then they started playing Friday by Rebecca Black every Friday once. Then it was the only song on Fridays. Then it was the only song every day, 5 times a day. Thank God that was my senior year. No idea if they still do it. Chaotic evil. Oh yes, I'm prepared for this answer. My school's mascot was a knight, and it was rumored that the school had the choice of installing a pool at the high school, or to commission a large, think like 25 feet long, metal sculpture of a knight on a horse, and to hang it from the ceiling in the back hallway. They opted for the horse. I was waiting for Ken Hour to pop up on here. Seeing that stupid pile of scrap shoved into the rafters like an afterthought is something I won't miss. That place was fricked and I'm just happy I never have to go back. Especially if Smith is still the VP. Frick that guy. They bought flags of all the states and put them around this caged-in area full of gravel. They caged in the gravel to stop students from walking across the gravel. They also bow flags in the school colors to line the fence around campus. Only thing is, we were in an area which can get very windy with 0 wind shields, so those flags took a beating. By mid-year they were an ugly, frayed mess. Honorable mention was the bridge they built across the courtyard. We weren't allowed to walk across that. They eventually paved over. Shout out to the flagpole a kid did for Eagle Scouts that was taken down that same year by admin. And big shout out to the admin during my little sister's years there, where they sealed off all the inner hallway doors and added extra doors outside to stop students from traveling between classes indoors. Don't know what that solved except adding extra minutes onto your travel time between class. $30,000 from 2 years of fundraising on an LED billboard about 10 feet off of a major road. It was so bright that it caused several accidents at night and had to be shut down about 8 months later because it was deemed a safety hazard. I hung out with several guys on the programming team and they figured out how to upload memes onto it. They couldn't figure out who did it, so no one got in trouble. Slamming memes onto a huge billboard sounds like the dream. The school had a jewel raffle in which the person would win a bunch of money via gift cards, and to enter they had to give up their vape pens. It worked as well as you'd expect it to. In 2011 my college spent $32,000 to have Snooki come in as an inspirational speaker in some misguided attempt to connect with freshmen. Around the same time there was a growing student-led movement to make the school more affordable. The student board revolted. People confronted her during her speech. It was a glorious mess. I went to a Catholic school high school. Very few of the students were actually Catholic and went there because the local public school district was terrible. We won some contests or grant and the school said they would allow the students to pick what the money was spent on. The options were new flooring for the gym, renovate the courtyard next to the chapel into a prayer garden, or renovating the courtyard next to the cafeteria into an outdoor eating space. Most people voted for new gym floors, and some people voted for the outdoor eating space. I do not know of anyone who voted for the prayer garden. Guess what won? The prayer garden. People, even teachers, were furious as the voting was clearly rigged to give us the appearance of a choice. If they really wanted a prayer garden, they should have just done the work without putting it to a vote. The funny thing about the prayer garden is that they actually made it nice and put in benches and plants and whatnot, but it was always locked and never used. Administration would often say during tours, "Oh, look at our lovely prayer garden for students." They voted for it. Number. No, we didn't. I love democracy. Murals in the bathrooms that replace the mirrors. i7 workstation laptops with Quadro GPUs, easily $2,500 plus each, for an elementary, K6, school. Those machines were designed for CAD work and media production, but were instead solely used for web browsing and Microsoft Word. I don't have any idea why they bought them. Likely bought with grant money that had to be 100% spent. I knew a guy who hopped between schools getting them all kind of out of the woodwork grants. He would buy tons of tech and hire us to install it. There are some small schools that are loaded with nice tech. It was really cool emo. Laminated ID cards that everyone had to wear around their necks on some dorky butt lanyard. No one freaking did it, so they made it punishable by detention. After that, Half the students still didn't do it and the detention hall became so overwhelmed that they began to make backlogs. After a few weeks, not wearing a lanyard gave you a detention 2 months from then. Eventually, detention became so backlogged that students started doing more severe transgressions because they would have graduated before they could actually be forced to go to detention. After about a month, no one had to wear their ID cards at all anymore. They said it was for security purposes, so no one could sneak into the school. The thing is, you could put literally anything in the lanyard, and no one would check if it was your actual student ID card. I had a blank index card in mine and no one ever said anything to me. If someone actually wanted to sneak into the school, all they would need is a lanyard and no one would ever check if it's actually authentic or not. My school did that too. And if you didn't have your card you would have to wait to get lunch until the very end when there was almost no food left. It was the worst. Our school paid to cover a huge lot with cement just to have a ceremony on it announcing a new building. Then they tore it up 2 months later to start construction. My school's fees went towards having nice cement for press pictures. What a joke. My school wasted so much money on plastic ID cards that you were supposed to scan into every room to assure you were there, and the IDs were also keys to get into the buildings. If you didn't have your card, you didn't get in and also get in school suspension. It wasn't a bad system BC, you could easily take a photo of your ID to scan into rooms, but you'd have to bum a buddy to get into a building. But once there were internet problems, the whole system would shut down, and living in a rural wee town, you could expect wind and rain and tornadoes and all that fun junk. When I went to college, the local NFL team paid for the school to go from a grass field to artificial turf. The school never said it was only half paid for by the team. My siblings had a whole year without paper, printers, no raises for staff, cutting school programs, and they slashed the art budget. The football team still got new uniforms that year though. My town got a brand new middle school, and somehow they spent $40,000 on a gained metal palm tree that they called the learning tree. One of the chair people essentially commissioned it from a relative. So many of us were super P. It didn't even have lights and there was no way to clean it, so it just sat there like the gained waste of money. It is just collecting dust. A graveyard. Instead of spending money on the students of the school, they decided that a graveyard would make them more money. Whenever I was in high school, my senior year, they decided to make technology improvements. So, they swapped a lot of old textbooks for iPads. They placed unnecessary TVs in the hallways. Waste of money. I don't understand the whole TV fixation thing. My science classroom in high school had a massive flat screen television which we rarely used for anything. Halfway through the year they took it out and put in an even bigger flat screen television that we never used for anything. Bailing out the son of the principal from jail with the grant money from the EU, provided to renew the computer facility. I trust that principal had an embezzlement suit on her hands. Our high school was way too into our football team. One year they decided to replace our grass football field with a turf one. IDKY. But even the football players would tell me we had the best grass field in the area. I don't know why they replaced it. You know, when high school football players say the school is spending too much money on them, something is wrong. Turf is an upfront cost, but it's a lot cheaper to maintain over the long term. My country is still a developing country, so many new technologies are not implemented and properly operated. 2 years ago, my high school installed an ID and a fingerprint scanner at the school main entrance gate so they can track whether the student came to school or not. Every student had to pay like $5-10 to get a personal ID card and get their fingerprint in the system. The principal was very serious with this the first week. Then couple of weeks later, students started forgetting their ID card. Some of them purposely annoyed the teachers as if they don't know how to use the machine or even put their fingers in the scanner. Then the machine started malfunctioning and eventually just stopped working one day and stood at the entrance gate, all dusty. A year later they did this again and stopped in a month. I don't know what's happening now. I remember it happened in Allen, TX. They got a bond issue to build a $50 million stadium. Once it was done they had their final inspection and saw a big crack in the foundation. So basically the football team couldn't use it for the season due to the school district making the company repair it out their own pocket. It went back and forth and finally the company who did had to bite the bullet and do the repair. When I started secondary school, we had a canteen with proper home style food being served. Cooked fresh, real meat and vegetables, good portion sizes. All the students loved it, and it was well used. School decided to replace this with a fast food style setup with processed burgers and fries to try and appeal to the kids, and up the prices, too. Within a month, nobody visited the canteen anymore. Practically every kid in the school started bringing food from home. It took 3 months till they changed everything back again. Massive expense for absolutely no reason. They bought a bunch of laptops for a magnet program. They were the worst laptops. My friend also didn't help by adjusting the battery settings to read critical at 98% and shut down. Epic. Instead of spending it on students, the butthole old people in my town decided to spend $400k on a sign for the front of the high school out of spite. There had already been a sign. My school buys so much useless things. Or at least when I went to. They dump all their money on the football team. Obviously the football team doesn't really care, but other people did. One thing that everyone has a common hatred for that the school bought, even the football team, is the inflatable the school got. From what I heard it costed about $4k. It's this big butt inflatable that people could walk through. The inflatable has the school's mascot on it and it's just plain weird. There were so many ways the school could have spent that money on, but they choose to spend it on stupid inflatable that is only used like 3 times a year. Guess inflation screwed over their finances. 3D printer. Sounds great, and I guess it's pretty cool, but no one uses it except for the engineering class sometimes because you have to pay to use it, and it's just a generally inconvenient process. And yet they still try to advertise it to us literally every day. Like, what do you want from me? I don't need a tiny plastic bench for $25. The university spent $40 million on a new building, and it's not even a top-notch school or anything. They basically paid for a bunch of nonsense and computerized classes that no teacher used. My university did the same thing for my final year. Whole new campus. I don't even remember how much they spent. Much smaller than the old one. Major network issues. Like 6 sexual assaults and 3 stabbings in the first few months because there were no lights and they built it right next to one of the shittiest areas in town. I could go on but I won't. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.